Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Insurance Experts. It's my pleasure to have on the line Ron Cohen, who's a long-term care insurance specialist. Ron, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Mark, for inviting me.
So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you become a long-term care insurance expert?
I became an expert interested in long-term care insurance about 23 years ago, and it came through a personal family experience, which most long-term care people that end up getting involved in the industry really do have a long-term care personal family experience. My dad had a stroke in 1996, and he was in the hospital for a couple weeks before the nurse gave me a piece of paper with a list of nursing homes on it, saying that my dad would have to go to a nursing home. I knew nothing about what Medicare paid for, but the nurse said to me, by the way, Medicare is not going to cover this because your dad is not going to recover.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. It's a tough way to get into this, but that kind of, I guess, piqued your interest in helping other people with long-term care planning.
It did. It did. After that experience, I was looking for a new career, and I saw that this industry was wide open. Not many people knew anything about, what long-term care was and what long-term care insurance covers, what Medicare covers. So I really got interested in it, and it's been my career ever since.
So, I know you were sharing with me a client story, someone you had worked with earlier on in your career. Tell us a little bit about that client and what resonated with you.
Well, it was a client that was a business client that had just recently sold his business, and he told me he got $32 million, and he had $32 million in the bank, and I was sitting there talking to him about long-term care insurance. I paused for a minute. I looked at him. I said, why would you want to buy a long-term care policy? You could buy a whole nursing home if you wanted to. And he looked at me very seriously and said, Ron, he says, I've always been able to look down the road and see potential potholes. And if I can see those potholes before I get there and fill them up, I feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more secure knowing that that problem has been taken care of. And I see long-term care insurance as being filling those potential potholes down the road.
Wow, that's a great story. And I always hear, people say if you have X amount of assets, if you have more than 5 or 10 million, you can quote unquote self-fund or self-insure. But I've always believed that, if you have more money, it's more likely that you'll want to actually hedge that risk. And the value of the policy, even beyond the financial value, is tremendous as well.
That's true. In fact, he ended up buying a policy that had all the bells and whistles that companies used to sell in the past, like lifetime benefits and a full return of premium. So this guy not only covered his risk down the road, he also protected his investment in that if he never needed care, he would get his heirs would get all the money that he put into it back.
Oh, that's an interesting strategy. So, yeah, tell us a little bit more about that approach. I know there's a few carriers on the market today that offer lifetime benefits and the ability to get the money back. How is that typically designed?
It's designed basically as leveraging your assets and repositioning an asset to cover the major risk, which is potentially a long-term care claim. You can use an asset like life insurance, cash value. You can use an annuity. You can leverage cash into a lifetime long-term care plan.
Okay, cool. And also, I know you can do a traditional plan with return of premium like you described for this client too.
Yes. There is a company now that does offer those benefits, lifetime benefits and return of premium.
So, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Of course, working with an insurance specialist is important so that they have access to all the different products out there. One last question I wanted to ask you is about this guy was selling his business, and I know there are certain business tax advantages. Is there a way to incorporate that strategy along with the business checkbook and the ability to get a tax deduction at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great point. Someone can actually protect against the long-term care risk, buy a lifetime long-term care plan, protect the potholes down the road, and still, on top of it, take a tax deduction for their business.
Very cool. Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm sure we'll have some more interviews with you in the future, and it's really our pleasure to have your expertise on the line here.
Thank you, Mark.